It is Thursday. RawMikeRichards.com, broadcasting live from the DKI studios in downtown Toronto, 234 King Street East out of the Pacific Junction Hotel. Oh, we got a great show today. If you're a wrestling fan, the information and the background stories you're going to hear from John Robinson going to be pretty cool. If you're a wrestling fan, this is a great show for you. The book is called Creating the Mania.
The Mania!
As in WrestleMania. And hey, for those who are haters of that particular entertainment genre, well, I would suggest that the billions of dollars that it is worth, the millions of fans that they get both live and via pay-per-view or whenever it is on, that the legions of fans of this particular, if you want to say sport or sport entertainment, no one, almost no one in terms of a professional organization has done a better job. Okay, the NFL. But it is, if someone would say, well, how can you compare wrestling to the NFL? Easy. Money. Money and audience. That's how you keep score. Money and audience. So you could have the greatest sport in the world. I love hurling. It's very well done. How many people have seen hurling or know what I'm talking about? And I don't mean the hurling that happens after the Legion at about 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night.
You know they're trying to get rid of legions, too? They better not.
What do you mean?
There's been a couple of reports saying they're starting to close down more and more legions, and there might come a time where legions don't exist. Isn't that sad?
Oh, how respectful for the veterans that had a place to go where they could talk. And granted, there's not many of them left.
No.
But from my perspective, almost anyone I've met at the Legion, it is a very community-centric building that even in the smallest of towns in any province in Canada, that they will go there because they have a similar experience because of an uncle, because of a grandfather. They go there, they play darts. Like, it's really very homey when you think of it that way. And they've always looked after their own. They've always given back to the community. I don't know one Legion that isn't a part of any of the communities they're in, that they don't donate, send volunteers. And so what? Why would you close that down? What would be the point of taking that away from not only the people who have joined? Some of them have been there since the 50s. Why is that being taken away?
Bingo.
This world sometimes really sucks.
Yeah, it does.
It really does.
It does. So, anyway.
Well, let's pull some more statues down, too. I'm sure we can find something that that is so topical to, as I say, most of the time when I want my son or your sons, daughters, to be able to live in this country, maybe afford a house. Afford a house. Should that not be the concern? Shouldn't the economy really be the number one thing that we think about? So for Russell, pick up the mic there for a second.
It's good. Don't worry.
No, this is no. I'm serious. That's why we're not playing the Russell music.
Okay.
So when you look at job opportunities, and you've picked one of the more difficult ones to enter, do you think about at some point purchasing a home?
I would like to. I don't know if it's going to be able to be a thing in the future, but I would like to buy a home.
And if you had to say, and right now, how old are you?
I will be 21 in about a month.
Okay, so 21.
When's your birthday?
September 22nd.
Yeah,
so
very good.
Actually, I think that's a month today.
Oh,
no, a month yesterday.
Yesterday, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but you would say to yourself, in terms of percentage of being able to afford a house, what's the percentage in your head?
Like, it depends on what age, but like in my 20s, less than 50%.
Right. So
I was gonna say 25%.
Yeah.
For it's ridiculous.
For Dave and my age group, did I ever think that I couldn't afford a house?
Nope.
That never dawned on me.
Exactly.
No, I knew it would be expensive. And for our time, I guess it seemed expensive. But now, where literally it is so strange to hear people of our age group talk about a home or getting $1 million. $1 million was a fantasy. $1 million. If you had $1 million, you're getting $1 million for your house. Then you lived in like a mansion. That's a mansion.
Now it's a bungalow.
Well,
1,500 square foot bungalow.
in Toronto,
Yep.
in Vancouver, in Montreal. Calgary, not as expensive now, but it goes in cycles.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm saying, realistically, it's $600,000 or $700,000 in your head, depending on how far from one of those major markets or bigger cities you choose to live in.
Even in Mississauga, just about a 5-minute drive from where I am, they're starting to build a bunch of semis, and the sign outside of them says, "Get in on these semis starting from 1.2 million." And I'm like,
yeah. And so what we need to really be concerned about is pulling down a statue of a man that has been dead for 200 years. What we really need to concentrate on is taking away the Legion. This is what I'm talking about. I understand there's a sensitivity, and for Justin Trudeau, he is Mr. Sensitive. But the reality is, I think we've got to start to understand that not only, be nice to others. By the way, that were written a long time in a book. There was 10 of these things. Oh, it escapes me now. But it was in there. So it's been around for a while. It's been around for a while. So what I really want to see is...
He's talking about the Bible.
Get our shit together. Start looking after our children so they can actually have a life. So they can afford a home that's not maybe in the Arctic Circle. Because otherwise, this whole, well, remember, 75 years ago, these people did bad things to these people. Yeah, I feel bad about that. And I think that's why we are, I'm hoping, a kinder, gentler generation. But we've gone so far to the other side that it's created anger. We've gone so far over the top. It's not about being treated the same. It's about everyone's group is special. We're special. We're a special interest group. Let's look after these communities. We're not getting it, folks. We just don't get it. And history will repeat itself. We have learned nothing. And when I look around the world and when I see what is boiling, and as I said yesterday, the fires that you see on this planet, seemingly in every province we've got these issues. You know what happened in California. You see it around the world. It is almost a subtle simile for what is going on the planet, because we are burning ourselves up. And it's something frightens me that it wouldn't take much to have some catastrophic thing happen between one of these hothead leaders. Like, do you really think that Trump would be afraid to do something? He's not. Do we think that the wingnut over in North Korea, do we really think that he's, as much as they say they're going, we don't know. The Middle East has really, for years, when I was a kid, and you see Henry Kissinger and trying to get, Israel and Palestine, and then all the other groups that we've seen since that time with their wants and needs, but nobody wants to settle. It's not okay just to be part of the group. Someone needs to prove something. That is my fear. My fear is that it may not even be any of those places I've talked about, but somebody who wants to prove a point, either from a country standpoint or a far left or right religious standpoint, that they feel that they need to make a statement. We've already seen planes fly into a building. Why? It was to make the statement that they're touchable too in the U.S. And what was it? It was an extremist group, not representing the whole. It was the extremist group. And my fear is, I don't know. And I'm not, as Dave will tell you, I'm not a pessimistic person. I'm not a negative person. But am I that naive to think, with all the heated feelings, and again, whether it's from a standpoint of what they need to do from their own country, is it an economic need? But sometimes it tends to be a religious one, and I don't see that stopping anytime soon. So I really hope and pray that we understand. Let's get it together.
Yeah.
Then and guess what? I think there's going to be changes. We saw a change in Ontario already. You're going to see one in Alberta, and everyone's on their watch looking at that one. Next May, NDP, you're out. Conservatives will be back in, and I would only assume the same thing might happen nationally. Is Justin someone, do you think, that's going to get back in?
I think he's somebody that could be replaced, yes.
So, look, just for the betterment of the world, and I think this is the thing, it's not like the anger we see south of the border, which it really sort of saddens me. And I understand why there's pushback for Trump, because some of the stuff he does, quite frankly, it seems like a weird reality TV show or a movie that is almost far-fetched. A president who tweets like really like a normal person, if I use that term, on a daily basis where you're actually kind of bombing on people
Bingo.
via Twitter. I just never in my lifetime would have thought that, someone of that chair in that office
Would do that.
would be
Yeah, totally agree.
Like it's just bizarre. I wish the best for the world. I really do.
Sidebar, because you brought up Henry Kissinger after the show, and you got to remember this. Russell does an excellent Richard Nixon impression. So after the show, get him to do that for you.
Boy, I'm waiting for that.
Yeah.
That's going to be very exciting. Speaking of exciting, I should have taken the picture. So, speaking of fires, there was a huge explosion in Kitchener.
Yes, I know.
And then
unreal.
And so I'm kind of like, go to the TV yesterday afternoon, and there's my cousin John.
Uh-oh.
Did you see those? I put it out there. My cousin John's the fire chief for all of Kitchener, and it was his wife's birthday yesterday. So I'm like, you know what you got for your birthday? A hero husband. And actually, John didn't really do anything. He just kind of showed up at the press conference. But what a bizarre story, considering what I went through with my pool heater. But that's what would have happened. That's what was so close to happening to my house. So can it happen to anyone? Yeah, it probably can, and it did yesterday in Kitchener. So there was at least one fatality, I believe, regarding that. So that was pretty serious yesterday.
Very serious, yep.
Also, looking at back to the world of sports, the Toronto Maple Leafs make an announcement, and Haley Wickenheiser, who we've known for a long time, has been hired as an assistant director of player development. And so, when I saw that today, number one, congratulations to Haley Wickenheiser. If you've ever spent any time with her, you'll know that she is probably one of the coolest people you can sit down with. I mean, she has been a good friend of the show and my show, going all the way back to the Calgary days. And I just think that it's interesting that, as you incorporate more women into the world of sport, I happen to think if this was years ago, this would have been disastrous. And I can only imagine what some of the locker room shenanigans would have looked like. But this is a day and age where I don't think they would see that. I think the guys of this age group, I don't think it's going to be necessarily the big crossing a massive line socially that it was, Dave, maybe 10 or 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. We've already seen it in the NBA. Yep. You see women officials. You see women doing play-by-play of sports that were completely dominated by men. You can watch college football and hear a female voice now. So is it that really that stunning that a move like this was made? I don't think it is anymore.
I don't think it is anymore, and it's a significant name in the industry, in the hockey industry. She might go down, if not the best ever women's hockey player in the history of the game. And her official title is the Assistant Player Development with the Maple Leafs. So she's kind of
I look at it, she's kind of the Gordie Howe of the sport, because
yeah, that's fair.
I don't put it as a Gretzky necessarily, because I'm sure there was players with a little more finesse, and maybe, I don't know, I'm not going to sit there and break down, the Cassie Campbells of the world. I mean, they would do that. Mm-hmm. But she seems like the greatest ambassador, next to someone like Cassie Campbell, that the sport's ever had, and she was kind of the first one.
Yeah, exactly, because you put that into the category. You mentioned Cassie Campbell. The United States will sit there and talk about Cammie Granato, who we had on the show before.
Yeah.
So, there's certain trailblazers that, when we're 20, 30, 40 years down the line, and we look back at this time where women's hockey kind of made that next step, and we started seeing it played at the Olympics, and hopefully we're talking about women's hockey being a lot more competitive than the two countries, and basically that's it. And we're talking about U.S. and Canada, because there should be a time where we're looking at Sweden as a superpower, Finland as a superpower, Russia as a women's superpower, and hopefully one day we get a tournament that there's 6 or 7 teams that could win a gold, and legitimately we don't know who's going to win it any given year.
See, that's my biggest problem with that entire sport, is that every Olympics we just know who the two finalists are going to be going for the gold, and it's still not close enough for me. I still don't sit there and hold my breath. If Canada's not playing the U.S., I just assume that they're going to win, and sometimes by an embarrassing score. Mm-hmm. And they still have not caught up. You're watching Raw Mike Richards, either on the website or the dedicated YouTube channel. We appreciate that. As I mentioned beforehand, John Robinson, if you're a wrestling fan, Creating the Mania is the name of the book. And so I'm thinking, as a guy that's not overly versed in the sport itself, but I certainly have known many of the those who have participated in my time in Calgary. Obviously, certainly have got to know the Hart family pretty well, including and especially Brett. But when I'm a kid, what was the first? If you asked me what my first name was,
Brendan Steele. Brendan Steele.
No.
Oh.
If you go to The Flying, go to that name. I don't know why this sticks with me, and this is basically going back to mostly Maple Leaf Gardens. But here's the name that, for some reason, I think of first.
His opponent, weighing 235 pounds, from Amsterdam, this is the Flying Dutchman. One fall, time limit 10 minutes.
The Flying Dutchman is the first name I think of.
Intimidating.
Do you know who I'm...
I don't know who you're talking about.
Very intimate crowd.
With a jobber in Manitoba called the Tulip. Not
Well,
kidding.
George, our first look here.
Individual. One time Sweet Handsome was one of the partners in the Rip Hop Sweet Handsome team. Look at this here.
Look, Hanson just inviting him to take a special.
Yeah.
Now he lays
Oh, yeah. I would say times have changed by looking at some of this action. I always felt the onesie or whatever with the single strap didn't look... It's not very flattering.
The King Kong Bundy?
Yeah, it's...
heavy, vicious.
And for some reason, this is the guy that I remember first.
On the rib cage, George.
So,
I'll tell you, George. Whatsoever on this big man. None at all.
like, this is... We're going back now. This...
You started to say, George, the Hanson at one time.
No, this is not Stampede Wrestling, because at this point, there's like 100 of these associations, Dave, as we've learned over the years. They're all separate. They all have their own regions.
Punches in the midsection.
It's called the Territories.
Territories.
The Dutchman rolls in underneath.
The Dutchman.
George, I don't think he won.
Flying Dutchman, not just the Dutchman.
I think he's fighting the Swede.
Down there, went for the leg. Hanson just lowered his center.
As I
of
said-
ground.
Good rivalry.
Yeah. Uh-oh. Okay, that was not performed the way. Okay, all right. I think we've seen enough. But this is the, and look, this is the kind of stuff when I look at that.
That is not your first memory of wrestling, is it?
When they call it was it wrestling?
Wrestling.
So
some of the naysayers would call it that.
like it was regional, it was small town, but it was televised, and it was the ratings. Like people would sit
Off
around
the chart, yeah.
and watch on like a Saturday. Was it a Saturday afternoon
Usually
or
a Saturday morning or a Saturday afternoon.
And, and regionally, this is what I watch. Now, here is another one. Is this the Sweet Daddy Siki?
Ah, yes.
Now, this name was a little more famous.
This is massive in the Calgary area.
And also, so Maple Leaf Gardens into wrestling. This is, I believe, also. So is that CKLN?
CKLM.
Yeah. And so sometimes they go out, in the Atlantic part. But Sweet Daddy Siki, they just did a documentary on him, by the way.
Oh, I'd like to see that.
It's one of the CBC sort of docs.
Okay, I'll have to
and
look
apparently it's really good. As you find, we've talked how many wrestling documentaries have come out, and you're just fascinated by it. Sweet Daddy Siki, as a kid, I always thought, wow, very exotic. Obviously had the white hair, thinking, more from the Far East. I think he's American. He was born in like Arkansas or something like that. But the name, Sweet Daddy Siki, this is when wrestling starts to elevate, and you can tell by the camera work. You can tell by the kind of building it's in. And this is just getting a little bit closer to when I guess Vince McMahon's father is going to hand it down to him. And he's going to create something, as John Robinson is going to talk about, that is indeed, of all the words I can put on what follows wrestling, mania might be the best word.
I'm Milton Breskin here at ringside to describe the action to you, to suffer the slings and arrows that'll be heaped upon me, of course, by pretty boy Floyd Creechman. Floyd Creechman, there's I guess an old friend of yours.
They really throw around that Pretty Boy handle a little too liberally, if you ask me.
Quite
Gino Brito. We're talking, of course, of Tony Gattillo.
Gino Guido. I'm pretty sure you're not saying that these days either.
Sweet Daddy Siki. I want to talk about his $10,000 robe there.
Well, hold it. I was going to
I'm
ask
sure.
you a question.
That's an accurate assessment.
How does your good friend, The Rock, Rocky De La Sera, feel about
But see,
Tony
the
Gattillo?
theatrics at this point, Dave, don't you think this is a little bit of a precursor to what made like the WWF
Absolutely.
and the WWE eventually so important?
He's ahead of his time here, because what you're seeing in the next 5 to 10 years is guys like the Macho Man, more of a Ric Flair presence where he's wearing that kind of robe with the fur, with the feathers. Hulk Hogan turns, Pyro starts being introduced into the ring.
Tell us that Sweet Daddy's hair is naturally blonde.
He's a natural blonde. He's standing
He is a natural blonde.
150 pounds.
Sure.
48 pounds. He's got a 50-inch chest, 19-inch arms. Look at that. He's got a 20-inch waist.
A 20-inch waist.
Okay, would you like to borrow my extra pair of glasses?
No, I don't need
Okay, entering right now, a standing wrist lock taken. Sweet Daddy Siki goes to the hair and drags the stallion to the canvas, from whence he grabs that wrist lock.
Oh, the
He
stallion.
used force, physical force.
Of
He
course
grabs
used
the-
physical force.
did he say
Grabbed the hair
wristwatch?
and pulled his opponent to the canvas.
We
But
don't-
Gattillo has reversed the hold and put Siki to the canvas.
Not for a long mill.
That's true. Sweet Daddy Siki, always a very, very capable man
A
with
veteran.
tremendous maneuvers. Always able to get himself out of trouble one way or the other.
But you can see that, probably from the 50s, where you see a lot of those different holds. They pretty much figured out that it had to be more athletic than what you saw. That the guys probably had to be in slightly better shape, which eventually, as we get closer to the early 80s and the mid 1980s, then you saw guys, and thus the conversation of steroids and so on, because they started to look like the Stretch Armstrong, sort of the almost comic book-like sized figures.
Very well said.
And I think maybe, who was the first? Is Hulk Hogan?
Hulk Hogan's the first giant as far as being the poster child, because when Hulk Hogan brought him over from the AWA, which was the territory of Manitoba, Minneapolis, because a lot of people don't know this, but Hulk used to wrestle in Winnipeg 4 or 5 times a month. Me and Gene Okerlund, Ken Patera, Jesse the Body Ventura, the Killer Bees, the High Flyers, guys like that. They would be in there, and Vince McMahon found this blonde-haired, tanned giant of a man, amazing personality, the look, the voice, everything, and brought him over to WWE and basically put the crown on his head, and he rode with it for decades.
If we're talking about Hulk Hogan in that era, then the Macho Man, where does he fit on that
Macho Man,
Mount Rushmore?
Yeah, he is definitely part of it. Probably in the number 2, 3 spot overall. If Hulk's not there, it's Macho Man's game.
We're looking for John Robinson. It's Mike Richards from rawmikeRichards.com.
Hey, what's up, man?
Hey, John, thanks so much for joining us here. We're live on the air. We've just been looking at some of the older clips of I guess what I call the time of the territories, and just how different it was back then, pre WWF, pre, I guess, McMahon taking everything and making sense of it nationally. And it had its charm, and I think it's almost when you look at the story of wrestling itself, and of course the book, Creating the Mania, he kind of took the best elements of what he saw in the past, I'd say almost 30 years, and just magnified it and just took it and went to another universe. So in that case, is McMahon, from a business standpoint, is he a genius?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because he's got this presence about him. Like, I remember, the first time I saw him backstage, and it's like, oh my God, there's the guy that created my childhood, But yeah, I mean, he is a genius. He put together everything and brought it, on such a huge global level. And yeah, I mean, it's amazing when you think about what he's done, not only from a business perspective, but from storylines and creating characters and merchandise and movies and television and to the WWE network. I mean, he's revolutionized the industry.
John, when it first happens, there would be certain families in certain areas, not only across Canada but the United States, that pretty much have had it their own way since probably the 50s, because in that region, they would be the family. They controlled out of the gate the wrestlers that came in, how much the wrestlers actually got. So when this comes in as an idea to be a national sport, was there some pushback from certain areas or territories that didn't want to see it go that way?
Oh, I'm sure, because he's taken their business. I think back in the day when people used to share champions, and there were people like Andre the Giant who would go from territory to territory and be a star, and everyone was kind of shared, and I was like, no, now this is all mine, and I'm taking these guys, and we're gonna go national. Yeah, so obviously there's pushback because he's driving people out of business.
Yeah, certainly, John. John David Bastier, good talking to you. The name of the book, we're talking about Creating the Mania, an inside look of how WrestleMania comes to life. And that's just of recent year. I want to rewind to your first memories, because you've mentioned it a couple times to me in passing and also on this book, that your first memory of a WrestleMania is WrestleMania 2. Mine would be around the same time, WrestleMania 1 with, in 1985. When you look at what the first couple were like, which were amazing cards, but they were one-day cards, basically. The WWE took over for one day. It's really transformed throughout the 34 years, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I remember turning on, WrestleMania 2 and, seeing the British Bulldogs and, just blowing my mind of, how incredible these athletes are. But, yeah, I mean, it's gone from a one-day kind of mega event to a year building up to this mega event. And, obviously now it's, 6-7 hours. It's almost like going to a music festival or something. You're spending the whole day kind of celebrating wrestling. It's amazing to see the transformation and what it's become. And, if you go to WrestleMania in person, then it's almost like Super Bowl week for wrestling fans. If you go to the Super Bowl, it's not just about the Super Bowl. There's parties throughout the week, and there's different events that you can go to, and that's kind of how WrestleMania is now, where you can go to video game competitions and access and autograph signings and NXT events and Hall of Fame. It's become this incredible atmosphere where you walk down the street and everybody's wearing wrestling shirts, and people will start chanting, or you run into wrestlers, both independent wrestlers and WWE people, just walking down the street sometimes. Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
John, I think that's a great comparison. Dave and I were just talking about just the enormity of the event, and you put in Super Bowl. So when I kind of look at what happens in the U.S., if I'm looking at a Super Bowl, which is obviously a massive one-day event, you could probably argue in terms of numbers, the Daytona 500 also is a massive event. But I think you can easily throw any of the WrestleManias in that category simply by, in a one-day event, the numbers probably from those in the gate, what is sort of monetarily achieved. And when we look at specifically the latter, just money-wise, just how big is a WrestleMania for a city? Because it's my understanding that, not unlike some of these big events, cities now bid on something like this.
Yeah, it's actually a very fascinating part of the book I was able to get into. I was talking to the business people in WWE, and they were talking about how, back in the day it was almost like, oh, okay, let's go to Atlantic City, or let's go, to Detroit. And now you have, 10 to 15 cities coming in, bidding on WrestleMania, because it's an economic boom for these cities. Restaurants, hotels, they're bringing in, millions upon millions of dollars. So now cities are coming in and doing presentations, and you have the mayors coming in, and you have, representatives coming from the community talking about what they can offer WWE. I think before, when I first started, WWE was like, oh, this is what we can offer the city. And now it's the opposite. Now the cities are coming to WWE, trying to pitch them and saying, hey, this is why you should have it in Orlando or Miami. This is why, we would not only make a great WrestleMania town, but maybe a Royal Rumble town. And I think that's what you've seen it morph into is people are bidding not only for WrestleMania, but now, Survivor Series, SummerSlam, Royal Rumble. The big four are also starting to get into these bids. WWE's just done a phenomenal job on the marketing and business end. And like I said, it's just bringing so much revenue to these cities. It's incredible.
Yeah, it certainly does, John. John, just to tell our viewers, and we're showing pictures of the actual book right now, Creating the Mania. This book, I guess, if you want to put it in a nutshell, it's basically a year in the making, and you start writing about it a day after WrestleMania 33 because it is a 1-year process. Did you, over that time? I know you saw a lot of live events. You watched a lot of pay-per-views at home and so forth, but maybe take us into the numbers as far as how many wrestlers do you talk to behind the scenes, because it's almost like I sense it, and I did read the book this last week when we last text and so forth. You must have talked to at least I'm going to say conservatively 85 people in the industry in WWE itself.
Oh yeah, I think when WWE said put in a list of who you want to talk to for this book, I don't think they thought my request list was going to be 10 pages long or whatever. I mean, I was about I was like, oh, I want to talk to the cameraman, I want to talk to a director, I want to talk to a guy building the stage, I want to talk to the mayor of New Orleans, I want to talk to Daniel Bryan, the creative director. I want to talk to, basically everybody who I thought was going to be on the card. WWE laughed, they loved the way the book came out, but, the guy who's in charge of books was cracking up. He was like, yeah, this is definitely the most interviews we've ever done for one of our books. It was like every week I would be watching a show and be like, oh, okay. Now it looks like, Randy Orton, we knew he was going to be involved, but now that his match is kind of in, okay, I want to talk to Randy. Okay, now I kind of know what's happening with Sami Zayn. Let's talk to Sami. The Daniel Bryan situation, it was so fluid. When I first talked to him, it was like, oh, he's not going to be in. He didn't even know what he was going to do. He was trying to be cleared. And then, all of a sudden, a few weeks later, he got cleared, and it changed the entire card. But it was pretty interesting because, getting to talk to the people in creative multiple times, I kind of saw the card evolve. They would tell me, oh, okay, we're going to do Seth Rollins versus Dean Ambrose. And I was like, okay, cool. So I'd have that in the back of my mind while I'm talking to Seth and Dean. And then it's like, okay, Dean got injured, so that match is scrapped. They were going to do Jason Jordan versus Kurt Angle, then Jason got injured. And when you think of the domino effect that these matches would have had on the rest of the card, because then it's like, okay, if it's Jason Jordan versus Kurt Angle, who's Ronda Rousey's partner? And how's that storyline change?
Bingo.
So it's pretty fascinating to see throughout the year what I was being told and then what ended up happening.
We're in conversation with John Robinson. The book is called Creating the Mania, of the many books that he has written on it. And I would say this, John, so for me, I've always just been outside probably what is called a fan of wrestling. I just had a casual knowledge of it until probably the mid-'90s, where a radio station I'm working at, they had set it up where they're playing in Hamilton at the Coliseum, and I was to be the fill-in manager for the Honky Tonk Man, and it was Billy Gunn. Now, so I'm a little naive to what goes on, but what was fascinating, there's a bunch of things. Number one, behind the scenes, it's like a circus family, I guess is the only way I could put it. They all have these conversations and relationships with each other. Some of them are newer to it than others. I sit down with a very young Chyna, and she is telling me the story in this dressing room, and this is pre any work done on her whatsoever. She's not as big, or the face changing and so on. She's almost in tears, telling me how hard it is to catch on in this world, what the crowd says to her, what little kids say to her. And at that moment, I'm swept away. We got to go out and do the intros and so on. The crowd goes crazy. But the efficiency of how they do that show, and I would say it's a show, is probably professionally maybe the most incredible thing I've ever experienced. To a second, to a T, everybody knew what they were doing. They handed me a big wad of money on the way out and pushed me out the door, and then it was over. I mean, it was that quick, that efficient, and I don't know, in my experience as someone in the entertainment broadcasting world, I don't think I've seen anything in comparison to what I see in terms of the professionalism that they have in that business.
Oh yeah, it's incredible. And actually, the television director for WWE that I talked to in the book, he mentions like, oh yeah, I've worked, as a cameraman on, for NFL, NBA, MLB. He's like, there's nothing like WWE and what they produce on a weekly basis. And yeah, you're right. A lot of it is the professionalism, and it's crazy to be behind the scenes and walking around. Some of the interviews I got to do in person, like I went and met up with Roman Reigns before Raw, and as they're going over the matches, like all the other people, all the other wrestlers, superstars are in the ring going over their matches. I'm sitting there with Roman Reigns for like an hour, just talking WrestleMania and talking about Brock Lesnar and life on the road. It's cool. I got to sit in basically an empty arena with Braun Strowman. He's like, hey, come with me. And, it was like 4 hours before, his match. And we're the only two people in the entire arena, just like, sitting there chopping it up. It's a pretty awesome experience, and to be able to listen firsthand to these guys and to see up close, like Braun Strowman. Oh my God, like, monster among men. When you get next to him, it's like, oh, I can't believe how huge he is. This guy could like crush my head in any second if he wanted to.
Hey, John, throughout writing it and throughout the other books, because you have an awesome Ultimate Warrior book that I definitely recommend as well, among others. Did you ever get a chance to sit near or by or in the Gorilla section? And if for anybody listening, Gorilla section is basically the mind, the brain trust of what actually happens in the event. Vince McMahon sits right in an area just outside of the curtain. They call it Gorilla because as soon as you walk through the curtains, you're on the air. Did you ever get a chance to kind of sit in where everything that kind of coordinates it, the brain of the operation, and everything about an event? Did you ever get a chance to do that?
I'd see it. I'd be close by, but yeah, no, they never let me sit in Gorilla while the event was going on. I think I had amazing access, but even there were limits.
Yeah, I was going to say, because if you were in there, that may have been the best experience ever, and that's why I wanted to see if you were actually invited, because I would actually be surprised if you told me yes.
Oh yeah, no, that would just be incredible. But no, I think, not that I would be in the way, but I would hate to do anything, even personally, like that I don't want to screw anything up, where I'd get kicked out and never to return. But I'd hate to even drink something back there and spill it on Vince or something. I could just see it.
Yeah, I got news. That wouldn't be the first spill that happens backstage. I got a feeling. And you talk about size, and that same night that I had to do that thing, everything was kind of laughs and giggles, but there was one moment, and I guess they do this to rookies or neophytes like myself. Goldust comes up and kind of corners me and puts me in the corner and doesn't say anything. And all the other wrestlers are kind of watching because this massive being, and I got to tell you, that was not fun. I was sweating there because I didn't know what was going to happen. Maybe they do it to everybody, but it's just because they do crazy good, and I think that crazy exists in that sport. But in your experience with talking to all these wrestlers, is there one wrestler specifically that they say that dude is crazy? And I'm just guessing. Was the Ultimate Warrior in that category?
Oh, the thing about Warrior is, once I got him on the phone, it'd be 45 minutes later during a 15-minute interview, oh, I actually have to go. Oh, well, let me tell you this other story. Okay, well, wait, I got stuff to do. He would just talk and talk and talk. And, yeah, like once he got on a roll, it was pretty amazing. I was like, wow, I've never talked that much in my entire life. One guy that I thought was pretty funny was Bray Wyatt. For the NXT, I wrote a book on NXT, and he was telling me how, like, when he came up with the Bray Wyatt character, he actually went to jury duty in full costume and in gimmick. So, I can imagine, like, the judge asking him questions and him answering.
That is awesome.
That is awesome. Hey, what's your favorite WrestleMania? Do you like? I still look back at my childhood. I know this is a very popular answer, but I still look at Steamboat Macho Man in WrestleMania 3, and WrestleMania 3 may be my favorite because of the Hulk Andre angle, and when Hulk actually, he sort of body slammed Andre the Giant, but just the way the whole setup for that whole card and everything like that, that's probably my favorite memory. Do you have a favorite WrestleMania?
Yeah, you just stole my answer though. But yeah, WrestleMania 3, like 2's the first one I watched. 3's the one that I think made me a fan for life.
Yes.
3, it just had so much about it, like, the rings, the little rings they wrote in, to the ring, or
That's
like,
right.
getting, plus like just so many people. I've never seen a crowd that big for an event. I was just blown away. And then, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat was probably my favorite when I was a kid. So like to see him and Macho Man go out, which is probably still, my favorite match of all time. That there's just so many little things on that card that I've never seen before, like, King Kong Bundy splashing, he took out like a midget wrestler, right?
Yes.
And it was like stuff I'd never seen. I was like, what is going on?
So true.
See, the midget wrestlers freak me out. The midget wrestlers, I got a thing. It kind of freaks me out, like Little Lord Beaverbrook and all those little ones.
He was part of that match.
Oh, that freaked me out. That freaked me out. I like to see them thrown. Sorry, I just do. I did.
And then, I didn't even mention Hogan Andre, which is just such a spectacle. I think WrestleMania 3 to me has the characters, like Roddy Piper. You saw Brutus the Barber out there, shaven head, and I talked to Piper and I asked him like what his favorite match of all time was, and he was talking about, him versus Adrian Adonis. So I think like even among the wrestlers themselves, they look back at that card as something monumental and iconic, and like I said, that's the one that made me a fan for life.
John, I guess I've probably never asked this question of someone who's made a living, with their relationship with that particular sport, because it's funny, like Dave will put up with it. We have a lot of like, there's a lot of wrestlers and people in the wrestling business that have come on our shows over the years, and it's funny, those that aren't into wrestling, those, say, bosses that aren't into wrestling, they look at Dave and others that are in it and say, well, it's fake, or what are you, 12? You get these ribbings, these cutting jabs at people that are non-wrestling fans, and they just don't get it. What's your answer to that when someone comes up and said, "What are you kidding me? Wrestling? What are you 10?" What do you say to them, John?
Oh, it's funny. So when I first met my wife, when we went on like our second date, I was telling her how I was big into wrestling, and she was like, "Oh, this is like the most ridiculous thing ever."
No.
And I was like, "Oh, well, it's funny because back then, so I was writing for this video game magazine called Game Pro, and I actually became friends with some of the wrestlers back in the day, like D'Lo Brown and The Rock, and the Nation. I used to play video games with them all the time. So they just happened to be in town. So I was like, hey, let's go meet some of my friends. So I bring her to San Jose Monday Night Raw, and The Rock's like, oh, hey, go sit with his then wife, Danny. He's like, here's tickets, sit with her. And we're sitting there, and The Rock's fighting Triple H. And as a rib, rock through Triple H on top of my girlfriend, who's now my wife, like in the crowd.
That is pretty fun. And what true story, John. I'm pretty good friends with Christian of Christian and Edge fame, and we brought up your name, and Christian said, and I'm not joking, you are phenomenal at video games, and the guys loved playing video games with you. He totally remembers Johnny Ballgame, as you were kind of nicknamed, and Christian is pretty good at video games too, especially a certain one.
Oh man, Christian is amazing at top spin or whatever this tennis game is. Like he was ranked, I think at one time, like online in the world, he was ranked, top 10, top 20, I forget. But like he's an elite video game player. But I love Christian. He's a great guy, and he's another one that I'd bring games back with D'Lo, and Christian would come by and we'd play. A lot of the guys, I think they're there so early. They go to catering, and then they have like a few hours to kill. So if I came back with a PlayStation and Madden or NHL, something to play, we'd all sit around and chop it up and play some games. And it's pretty funny because I actually work for a video game company called Koei Tecmo. Like they make Tecmo Bowl back in the day.
Oh, fantastic game. Yep.
Yes, so I do PR for them, and we make a game called Dead or Alive. And at E3 this year, someone from WWE walked in our booth and was like, "Oh, is it cool if New Day comes in?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." Like I know Kofi for a long time, and Kofi came in, and he didn't know I worked there because he just knew me from like interviewing him for books and interviewing him when I used to work at ESPN. And he came in and was like, "Oh man, like what's up?" And then the New Day came in, played Dead or Alive for a while, did a video for Up Up Down Down.
Yeah.
It's just funny to see like the worlds colliding of wrestling and video games, and how it's been for me, throughout my career to just continue to see it even now, hooking up Xavier and Kofi and Eve playing video games.
Isn't it funny you mentioned that? Kofi Kingston was on our show, and he was awesome. Like, he was an awesome guy. I think that's still online. If you go to YouTube, you can still find it.
Yeah, really good dude.
Yeah.
We had him in the studio for about a half an hour, and that guy could almost do anything. And athletically, he's in a good spot right now. But even when he was solo, and I think you'll agree with it, John, maybe one of the most athletic guys that could probably do anything if you asked him to do it.
Oh man, yeah, he's been one of my favorites for years in WWE. And before New Day, I was always like, man, like knowing him and knowing his personality, it was always baffling to me, like how he didn't get a bigger push or how he didn't get more mic time. Because I mean, he's such a great guy and such a great speaker, and it comes across, I think, on television, and obviously with New Day now, I think everybody sees it. But he's just got like that it factor about him.
Yes.
Both athletically and personality-wise. So it's phenomenal to see New Day just continue to blow up. I mean, all three of them are great guys, and I think like the magic they have there, and Xavier actually talks about it in my book, is that they try to crack each other up, and then if they crack each other up, then they use it on TV. But like if someone says a joke and they don't laugh, then they don't use it on TV. So like they're almost like their own judges for creative, and they're given a lot of leeway. And I think they took the ball and they ran with it. But yeah, I mean, when Kofi was doing the thing back in the day with Randy Orton, and with the NASCAR, and dropped the paint on him, and he did he jumped from the crowd through the table. I thought Kofi was going, through the roof. I thought, man, this guy is going to be a champion. And I'm not, for whatever reason, there were speed bumps along the way, but it's great that he's back up on top of card now.
John, thanks so much for joining us this morning, man. It's just been a pleasure talking with you. The book is fascinating. The book is called Creating the Mania. I'm sure if you're a wrestling fan, this is going to be a must-have book. Just so enjoyable talking to you, and a lot of fun, just sort of reminiscing about the sport itself and the characters that make it, and the culmination of all those things making the literally billions of dollars that it does. So it was fascinating this morning. John, thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
That is John Robinson once again joining us here. The book is called Creating the Mania, and if you're a wrestling fan, boy, I got to think that how could you not want to have this book?
Yeah, absolutely. ECW Press, and it is out in all good bookstores. It was released on the 7th of August, so we were lucky enough to get them this morning in San Francisco.
You're watching RawMikeRichards.com, either on the website or the dedicated YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe, as I see you continue to do it. We like to see that. Now, before we went to John, I played a Sweet Daddy Siki. Now, this goes now to Grand Prix Wrestling, it was called. To me, the promos at times, Dave, the promos were just as good as sometimes better than the fights, because it is the world of the insane. And as you know, the Ultimate Warrior, I guess, is he? Didn't he change his name?
The Ultimate Warrior?
I think he changed his name to Warrior at some point. Did he?
To just Warrior legally.
Yes, legally.
Like if license Warrior. It actually says it on.
Like they're going, hey, isn't it Dan Stevens?
No.
No. Warrior. Like that's what it was. So here is a promo between Sweet Daddy Siki and someone called, I don't know if you know this, the Cuban, this is nice, the Cuban assassin, who looks literally and exactly like Charles Manson, minus the swastika tattoo on the forehead. But trust me, just as crazy.
You should have seen what we did to Archie Goldie and Stephen Pettifer last week. After we beat them up so bad, the Cuban and I, they have the nerve to want to have a street fight. Well, I'm going to tell you one thing, Archie Goldie. The Cuban and I, we grew up on street fights. We know everything to be known about street fights. Don't you ever tell anybody that you're the stomper, because we stomped you last week more than anybody ever stomped anybody. And what are we going to do to them, Cuban?
Archie Goldie and Stephen Pettifer, when you talk about love, we are the greatest. When you talk about boxing, we are tigers. When you talk about wrestling, we are the master of disaster. And if you talk about a street fight in Cuba, when we fight, we fight to the finish. We fight in the park. We fight.
Don't take the shirt off.
That's exactly what we do over there.
You want. And there's no way that a two Canadian like Archie Goldie and Stephen Pettifer can go in that ring and try to beat Sweet Daddy Siki and the Cuban assassin.
Yeah, didn't catch a word. But anyway. That looked crazy. That looks crazy. And before we go, I do want to sneak one more in. This is one of Dave's favorites, I believe, against one of my favorites, who I did not know was, at the time, of course, as I'm watching Canadian football, that he was going to wrestle as well. So here is a classic. This is the Iron Sheik.
Oh, yes.
Who loves Dave Bastel, by the way.
Oh, does he ever?
We got to find that clip of he loved you.
I still have the interview at home, unedited.
Versus Angelo Mosca, who went by King Kong, I believe, at this point. I believe he was King Kong. And this is a cage match. A cage match. There he is.
Your attention, please, ladies and gentlemen. Your attention, please. This is the final event of the evening. One fall or the 10 p.m. curfew for the Canadian Heavyweight Wrestling Champions.
There's a curfew?
This bout, as you can see, will be fought in a steel cage. No. Introducing first in the blue corner, the former All-Star of the Canadian Football League, weighing 301 pounds, Angelo King Kong Mosca. His opponent in the red corner, from Iran, weighing 260 pounds, the Canadian Heavyweight Wrestling Champion, Hossein the Great Arab. Special National Wrestling Alliance referee.
The Great Arab?
Event, George Scott.
He's at him multiple times. Yeah.
One fall or the 10 p.m. curfew.
Well, Billy Red Lions, this is it. No bout, in recent times at least, has been talked about more than this one. Just to bring our fans up to date, the last meeting between these two for the Canadian Championship ended up with Hussein, the great Arab, retaining his title because he ran away.
That's right.
So they've instituted, as you can see.
Check out his boots on the Sheik, by the way, the curls in the front.
They have locked the door behind him, so there is absolutely no running away this time.
Yeah, no running away.
And the special referee for this match has been appointed by the NWA, George Scott.
Look at that. That's a big crowd. This is big time right here.
Of years now. There we see Hussein there.
It's funny in these house shows, Mike.
Looking if there's any way he can possibly.
The wrestlers will go around the ring testing it, just for their own safety.
Yes.
They don't make it look like that, but they actually do it for them.
They've locked the door. You can see referee George Scott doing that.
Yeah, lock that door.
Come on, George, get to it.
Angela Mosca goes to work on his greatest adversary since the years in the Canadian Football League, Hussein the Great Arab.
I would say Joe Cap's probably the scarier opponent.
Second at 8 p.m., Maple Leaf Wrestling will return to the Brantford Civic Center, featuring all the stars seen here on Maple Leaf Wrestling, including the new Canadian heavyweight champion, Angelo King Kong Mosca. And on Sunday,
see, look at that. This was huge in the day watching at where the upcoming fights were going to be.
The Masked Destroyer will be there, along with Louis Lawrence. Cowboy Frankie Lane will be there, also Jim Nelson. Johnny Weaver will take on Jimmy the Superfly Snuka. The great Hussein Arab will go up against George Wells. United States heavyweight champion Rick Nature Boy Flair will risk his title against Greg Valentine.
Whoa.
A Canadian heavyweight title match, no disqualifications in this one. Angelo King Kong Mosca, the champion, will put his title on the line against the Russian Bear Ivan Koloff. Remember, that's Sunday, February 1st, 7:30 p.m., Toronto's Maple Leaf Gardens.
Yeah, known as the Iron Sheik, he was also the Great Arab, Colonel Mustafa, some people might know him, and also Ali Vassara. Those were his 4 ring names, the Iron Sheik.
Well, that is, for wrestling fans, that was quite a show. I'd like to thank our guest, John Robinson, the book called Creating the Mania, all the history that goes, and trust me, of all the sports, the history is really quite incredible, which is why when they do these documentaries on wrestling, you don't have to be a wrestling fan.
Nope.
The history itself is absolutely extraordinary. Once again, we thank John. The wrestling. Imagine having a private conversation with Warrior. I couldn't even imagine it. Hey, have yourself a great day. Remember to continue to subscribe. Yeah.
Do it.
Yeah.